Laughter followed, light and sweet, and James felt some of the tightness in his chest ease. That laugh was why he'd sold the Harley. That laugh was worth more than chrome and steel. "Grandpa?" she called out. "Yeah, baby girl. Can I have my medicine now?" James smiled to himself. She didn't dread the pills anymore, not like at the beginning. Back then she'd cried and refused, saying they were too bitter, too hard to swallow. But he'd made a game of it, calling them her superhero vitamins. Now she held her hand out proudly like a soldier taking orders. He carried the bottle into the living room and poured a small pill into his palm. She was curled up on the couch under her favorite blanket, a patchwork quilt his mother had stitched decades ago. Her eyes sparkled as she opened her mouth, letting him place the pill on her tongue. She swallowed it with a sip of water, then raised her arms like a champion. "Super Alana," she shouted. James chuckled, ruffling her hair. "That's right. Stronger every day," she giggled, leaning against him, her small frame warm against his side. For a moment, everything felt right. He had given up his Harley, yes, but in its place was this: peace, hope, and the knowledge that his granddaughter had another chance. Still, when the night grew quiet and Alana was tucked into bed, the weight of the sacrifice pressed in. James sat on the porch, the cool night air brushing against his face, and stared at the empty garage. He could still hear the phantom rumble of the Harley, still see its shine when he closed his eyes. He missed it like a lost limb. But then he thought of the way Alana had smiled after taking her pill. Her cheeks rosy again, her laughter free of coughing fits. That was worth more than any ride down an open highway. The following days slipped into a new rhythm. Each morning, James gave her the medicine, watched her energy slowly return. She could walk from her room to the kitchen without needing to sit down halfway. She could play with her dolls again, her laughter filling the small house like music. James cooked, cleaned, and kept track of every pill, every bottle, like a soldier counting rations. He stretched the money from the sale carefully: groceries, gas, bills, and most importantly, the next round of medicine. Every dollar spent was a calculation. Every coin mattered. But outside their little home, the world didn't let him forget. At the grocery store, he caught whispers as he pushed the cart through the aisles. "That's him, the one who sold his Harley. Shame man like that reduced to begging for medicine money. I always knew he wasn't going to keep much for long." He ignored them, head high, though the words stung. People who had never sacrificed anything for anyone now looked at him as though he'd been stripped bare. Pride didn't fill prescriptions. Pride didn't save little girls. One afternoon, as he loaded bags into the truck, he saw Carl Jenkins leaning against his car across the lot, smirking again. Carl tipped his hat mockingly. "Hey, Carter, how's that little miracle medicine working out? Worth giving up your pride?" James didn't answer. He climbed into the truck, hands tight on the wheel. Carl laughed, the sound carrying long after James drove away. Back home, Alana was waiting on the porch, her face bright when she saw the grocery bags. "Did you get apples, Grandpa?" James forced a smile, holding up a bag. "Got a whole sack, sugar." She cheered, bouncing on her toes. The sight of her excitement pushed Carl's words to the back of his mind. For her, he could endure anything. That night, as he tucked her in, she whispered, "Grandpa, when I get big, I'm gonna buy you a new motorcycle." James felt tears sting his eyes, but he kissed her forehead and smiled. "I'd like that, baby girl. I'd like that a lot." She drifted off to sleep, and James sat beside her bed a while longer, listening to her steady breathing. The medicine was working. She was stronger already. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to hope. But deep inside, he knew this was just one battle in a long war. The medicine was bought, yes, but the money would run out, and the world outside their home still watched, waiting, some eager to see him fall. James tightened his jaw. Let them watch. He'd keep fighting, no matter what it cost him. For Alana, he'd give everything. James woke before sunrise, as he always did. Old habits from the service never left him, and even now, decades later, his body rose with the dawn whether he wanted it to or not. He brewed a pot of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and studied the pill bottles. The labels stared back at him, a quiet reminder of both his sacrifice and his granddaughter's fragile strength. In the stillness of the morning, he let himself breathe. Alana was sleeping peacefully down the hall. Her color was better these days, her cheeks no longer pale and sunken. The medicine was doing its work. That was all that mattered. But as soon as he stepped outside, reality waited. The world beyond his door didn't see a grandfather saving a child. It saw weakness. The first sign came on a Wednesday morning. James drove into town to pick up bread and milk. As he parked his truck, he noticed two men standing by the hardware store, talking low and chuckling. They didn't stop when they saw him. "Sold his Harley like it was a yard sale trinket," one of them said loudly. "Guess that's what pride's worth these days." "Man's got no pride," the other replied. "Used to think he was something." "Guess not." James clenched his jaw, pushing the cart faster down the sidewalk. He'd fought wars, buried friends, built a life brick by brick in a world that didn't want him. Pride was something he understood better than most. But pride couldn't buy insulin. By the time he reached the grocery store, whispers followed him like shadows. People didn't lower their voices anymore. Pitiful. Should have just let the Lord take the girl, instead of throwing away what made him a man. Folks like him always sell themselves cheap. James kept his head high, eyes forward. He'd faced worse than words, but each whisper chipped away at him, like stones thrown at a wall. The cruelty wasn't always whispered, either. One afternoon, as he waited in line at the pharmacy, Carl Jenkins strolled in with a grin stretched across his face. Carl made sure the whole room heard him. "Hey, Carter," he drawled. "How's life without your shiny toy? Streets sure been quiet without that Harley rumbling through." James didn't answer. He kept his eyes on the counter. Carl chuckled. "Bet you miss it. Bet you close your eyes at night and pretend. You still got something worth riding." The pharmacist shifted uncomfortably, glancing between them. No one spoke up. No one ever did. James paid for the prescription and walked out, his shoulders stiff. Behind him, Carl's laughter echoed through the store. At home, he never let it show. Alana didn't need to see the weight he carried. She needed only his smile, his steady voice, his assurance that everything was fine. For her, he could pretend. But at night, when the house was quiet, he sat alone on the porch with a cup of cold coffee and the ghosts of his past. He thought about the men he'd served with, how they'd talked about honor, loyalty, and respect. Back then, a man's worth was measured by his actions, not his color. Now, back in his own town, none of that seemed to matter. Word spread faster than wildfire. By the end of the month, James wasn't just the man who sold his Harley. He was a cautionary tale told with sneers and smirks. The man who gave up his pride for a little girl. The man who'd traded steel for sympathy. On Sundays, when he drove past the diner after church, men on the porch would raise their coffee cups like a toast, mocking him. "Need a ride, Carter? Since you can't manage one yourself anymore?" James said nothing. He never did. But inside, the anger grew. Not at them he'd long since stopped expecting. Kindness from certain men, but at the cruelty that seemed so senseless. What had his granddaughter ever done to deserve their ridicule? What did they gain by mocking a man who had sacrificed for family? One evening, after another long day of biting his tongue, James found himself sitting at the edge of Alana's bed, watching her sleep. Her small chest rose and fell steadily, her hair spread across the pillow like a halo. She stirred, eyes fluttering open. "Grandpa?" she whispered. "I'm here, baby girl," he said softly. "Why are you sad?" James froze. He'd thought he'd hidden it well. "I'm not sad," he lied gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Just tired." Alana studied him with those wide, knowing eyes that saw far more than he wished. "It's okay if you're sad, Grandpa. You don't have to pretend." Her words pierced him deeper than any insult from the town ever could. He swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "Maybe I am a little, but it's not your worry, sugar. You just get better." She smiled faintly. "I'm trying." Then she reached out, placing her small hand on his. "You don't have to be alone, Grandpa. You have me." Tears burned his eyes, but he blinked them back. "That's right. I have you." That night, as she drifted back to sleep, James sat longer than usual, her words echoing in his mind. He realized then that the town could laugh, they could sneer, they could tear down every shred of his reputation. None of it mattered, because in this house, in this room, lay the reason for his sacrifice. They could never understand it, and they didn't need to. Still, he knew the cruelty wasn't done. People like Carl weren't satisfied with whispers and smirks. They wanted to break